Hello and welcome to Wilde at Heart, the podcast where passion meets perspective and where we talk to the legends who have lived it, breathed it and never backed down. I'm your host, Glenn McCrory, former world boxing champion, proud Geordie and always up for a good chinwag with those who have got real stories to tell. Now today's guest needs no introduction in the Northeast, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He's a man who has been at the very heart of Newcastle life for decades. A voice, a pen, a personality, larger than life and twice as sharp. He has seen it all from the highs of the Magpies to the heartbreaks on the back pages. Joining me is the one and only John Gibson, legendary journalist, Geordie icon, and a man who has told the tale of sport in this city better than anyone else. So settle in, because this is going to be a proper conversation, full of heart, humour, and a bit of fire too. John, this is it's a great pleasure to have you here. This is something that I've wanted to do for a very long time, and that's have a real in-depth chat. We've known each other for a lifetime, haven't we? Known each other 45 years and counting, and we've had lots of chats. Some of them have been better than others. Some of them you can't understand, but it's nice to just find out about you, because you're always talking to other people. You're always finding out about them.
That's my job,
yeah. And you know, we come at a time now when Newcastle, which has been your job for 5.5 decades,
57 years non-stop.
57 years, and a bit of a career before that as well, but 57 years non-stop, and they're finally having a great spell.
Yeah.
So
Special for me, Glenn, because when I first come back from Fleet Street for the Newcastle United job, I didn't intend to come back. I was in Fleet Street, that was going to be the rest of my life. And then suddenly the Chronicle phoned me up and said, look, the Newcastle United job's available, would you like it? And I thought, oh, the love of my heart, this has got to do this. But I thought, Shy Ben's getting out, be cheeky, so I said, yeah, I'll come back, but if you send me to the World Cups and the Olympic Games as well. And they said, oh, we'll have a think about that. And I thought, they're going to say no, but I'll go anyway. But I left it, come back a couple of days later, and they said, that's okay. I said, oh, fabulous, great. So back I came. And it's very easy to remember because it was 1966 at the end of that season. So my first job was to cover the World Cup in 66, which England ended up winning, and then start the Newcastle job. And that was in 66 I started it. By 68, Newcastle were embarking on the one season where they won a European trophy. So right at the start, I saw England win the World Cup and Newcastle win a European trophy. I thought, this is terrific. What a life I'm going to have here. We're going to be winning something every 2 years. Until this year, not a solitary single thing for Newcastle United or England in all that time. So I don't know if I was a jinx. I'm the only man still standing that saw them win something originally. But it's been fabulous to see them come out and win the first domestic trophy in 70 years this season and qualify for the Champions League. Wonderful.
there has been some tough times during that period, though, hasn't there? I mean, did you ever think we were actually going to be having a year that like we've just had, when we're going to be celebrating so much?
When I was in the middle of the Ashley period, which was a decade and a half, I mean, you know, I had to make certain that there was no sharp knives around so it would cut my throat, because it was as bad as that. And as a Geordie who was a fan as well as a reporter, I really had to be, I had to keep going and keep going and keep going. And then all of a sudden we get the takeover, we start to get the sort of results we expect. We go from regular relegation fighters to looking to get into Europe. We're playing 2 cup finals in 2 years and we win the second one. And the future looks so great after the past. It's like being down a pit and you know, living your whole life in a pit where it's dark all the time, and suddenly you come up and you're walking down the sunny side of the street. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, I'm expecting so much and hoping for so much now that I've made a deal with the big man. I've cancelled dying. I ain't going to die. I'm going to stick around because I want to see them win all the things they didn't win in the previous years.
But how lovely of you when this has happened. You've had the Carabao Cup, great celebration scenes.
Oh.
We've never witnessed
300,000 people when they come home.
And instead of you being there on the open top bus, instead of doing the journalist, the big wig, you go with your grandson as a punter and go and watch that. What did that feel like?
Oh, I mean, I wanted to stand in the street because, believe it or not, when they won the Cup 51, 52 and 55, I was just a bairn in little grey trousers, short trousers, etc. And I stood just outside of the central station on the pavement watching the bus go past, and they're all out of the sunroof with the FA Cup, and the magic of it, the excitement of it, the wonder of it. But I thought it was going to happen all the time. It happened 3 times in 5 years, and as a little kid I thought, well, this is life. This is the way it's going to be. I mean, I was
70 years.
I was an old age pensioner when I watched it again, and I thought, what happened in between? Actually, nothing happened in between, apart from the Fairs Cup, which was a magnificent.
Which grandson was it?
It was the youngest one, Charlie, because he's up here. Max, who's now 18, is in London, and his dad's an Arsenal fan, so I made a point of telling him this last season it's gone, Arsenal won out and we won the League Cup. So you're supporting the wrong side, kid. You should be supporting the black and whites.
Well, let's take you back to when you were that young child, born in Benwell. So proper Newcastle start.
Absolutely, West End of Newcastle. The amazing thing is, as well, Glenn, when I was a kid, all the other little lads that were at school, I was at school with, wanted to either play for Newcastle United or drive a train. I never wanted to play for Newcastle United. I wanted to write about Newcastle United. It's quite amazing from that early age. Never wanted to, just as well, because I couldn't play, but I didn't want to. I wanted to write. And one of my first memories that I've got is that I was brought up by my grandmother and grandfather, and was of my grandmother. Well, that's a good story, actually, because I was born during the war, and my dad was fighting in Egypt. He was
Rommel.
Yeah, he was fighting Rommel in Egypt, and my mum went home to her mum to have the baby because you had them at home in those days. So I was born at my grandmother's. When my dad come back from war, I don't know whether he took one look at me and took fright or whatever, but he decided that the two of them should disappear to somewhere else in Newcastle, and I didn't go with them. So I continued to live where I was born, and I was brought up, therefore, by my grandmother and grandfather, who I called all my life mother and father. So I had a mother and father and a mum and dad. But I was brought up by my grandparents.
That must have been really, really hard for a young lad who probably sees his dad out in the war as a hero, and then comes back and you've got that rejection.
Yeah, I mean, I think it hit me more as time went on, Glenn, than at the time. At the time you're small and you love your grandparents, but as time went on, I was beautifully balanced. I had a chip on both shoulders, I mean, with my mum and my dad, and I could never really understand why that happened, especially as they then had another child, my sister, a lovely, lovely lady who's just died recently. And she was a stranger to me because I wasn't brought up with her, which was sad, was tremendously sad. And I mean, my mum used to come and see me regularly, but my dad, I saw him once a year. He came at New Year's Eve. The whole family met at Mother's on New Year's Eve, so he came over on New Year's Eve. But I didn't see him the rest of the time, and I spent 6 weeks in hospital when I was 10, 11, and my dad never come to visit me. He wasn't a bad man, but he never come to visit.
Do you think the war had left its, as it must have with so many, left a mark on him?
Maybe I was so busy, I think, feeling sorry for myself that I never wondered what made him do it. But let me emphasise one thing: I was lucky, because mother and father were the best people that could have brought me up. My father, my grandfather, which I call mother and father, mum and dad. But my grandfather died when I was 10, so I just remember him now. But my grandmother lived till she was 90, and was the inspiration for me. She was a little lady. Honestly, when she served at the table, you couldn't see her because she was that small. She was behind the table, you couldn't see her. But she had a huge, huge heart, and she was so good for me. I used to sit and listen to every year, listen to the FA Cup final on Rediffusion Radio, as it was then, in the corner. And my grandmother, mother, used to make me a huge rosette about the size of a frying pan of both the sides that were playing in the final, out of a clippy mat. You know the stuff where you made a clippy mat, you sewed it all together, and it was material, and I had the two rosettes, and I would listen to the match, and then when one of the sides was winning, I would put that rosette on. So at the end, when the final whistle went, I had the winner's rosette on, Wolverhampton or Birmingham City or whatever. This was after Newcastle won it 3 times in 5 years.
So where did the pen to paper, where did the writing come from? Was your grandmother? Did she read to you? Was there any...
To be truthful, I think it was listening to the radio. I was lucky to be brought up before television, because when I listened to the radio, and I used to listen, you would know of these people because of Boxing Guy, I used to listen to the big fights in America with Eamon Andrews and Raymond Glendenning. And you know what? Your imagination could run riot. When you watch the telly, you see what's happening. You don't have to think about it, you can see it. But on radio, I could see what I wanted to see. I could hear their words, and I could just imagine whatever I wanted to imagine. And I could imagine romance. And the writing bit came where Mother used to get together brown paper, which was always greasy, and she'd fold it over, and she'd sew up the side to make it into a scrapbook. I would then cut little photographs out of the Chronicle of the Newcastle United players, Joe Harvey, Jackie Milburn, people I'd work with later in life, and I'd stick them in the book, and I would write a little word, only about 5 or 6. One of my kids got that scrapbook, and she's given it to me recently, and I've got it at home, and I've got Joe Harvey, ... He is a very good player. I don't know where I got the style from, magnificent. I lost my style after that. But I mean, he is a very good player, you know that. And that was the way I went through life, was I visualised writing about players, and I graduated from that. From day one in newspapers, I always wanted to be a sports writer, not just a journalist. You had to be a journalist, Glenn, to start with. When I started on a weekly paper, you had to cover everything. I covered Jehovah's Witness meetings. I stood outside of churches in Corbridge and Hexham to make notes of who the mourners were, etc. But the highlight of my week was going on the seal at Hexham and reporting on Hexham Hearts or Hexham GPO, that match, and I had a week to write it up because it was a weekly paper, but that was the highlight of my week. And the Chronicle came to take me from the Covent, but it was as a news reporter, and I said, no, I'm not going. They said, well, come and join us, do news, and then you can get transferred to sport. I said, no, if I make a success of news for you, and I will, then you will never transfer me to sport. I'm not coming. And they come for me a year later, when there was a sports job, and I joined the sports desk. But I was always going to be a writer.
So you've always known what you wanted. You've always known your direction you wanted to go, and you've always had that stubborn streak to make sure you got it.
Yeah, and I think, Glenn, you know, the background I had, where my mum and dad went to live in Gosforth, and I continued to live in Benwell, I think that gave me the backbone, you know, when I look back now, because I used to think, right, I'm going to show you, Lord, how good I am. I'm going to be at the front of the queue, not at the back of the queue, left behind. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make a name for myself. And when I make a name for myself, you'll want to talk to me then, won't you? And I think it gave me, because you need a lot of guts to fight your way through. There wasn't an ordinary path in those days, Glenn. Now, you go to university, you get your degree, you then may join a school of journalism at the Chronicle, etc., etc. None of that. I went straight from school to a weekly newspaper, to the Chronicle, etc., etc. People now are sometimes 25-year-old before they actually start their career on the sports desk at the Chronicle. I'd come back from Fleet Street by then. Yeah. I'd worked Fleet Street and done the lot.
So the talent was obviously obvious pretty quick because you got straight to Fleet Street.
Yeah, I don't know where it come from, Glenn, in terms of, by the way, it's the only talent I've got, and I thank God that I've got that, because the rest of the talent is absolutely hopeless. Tech or sticking wallpaper up on a wall or something, honestly, I am dreadful. All my potatoes are on one sack.
You've done all right with what you've got, John.
With a hand the big man's dealt me, but yeah, it was ambition, and I've always had that drive of wanting to be the best. And quite surprisingly, it stayed with me, which is why I never retired at 65, etc., etc. And even today, when I look at other writers at my age and in the twilight of my career, and I'm still in a career, I look back and I think, I still want to be top dog. I'm not top dog, but I want to be.
The Chronicle must have took you away from your beloved, took you away from Newcastle United. What were you doing? Sorry, what were you doing in Fleet Street? What were you doing with the Sun?
Yeah, I was covering sport. It's when I first started writing books. I've written 17 books now, as you well know, Glenn. The first 2 books I wrote, I was in Fleet Street. I ghosted the autobiographies of 2 West Indian Test cricketers, Wes Hall and Ron Canai. And then I got the chance to come back to Newcastle to report on Newcastle United. But I already had my foot in the door of being an author, because when I was a Fleet Street writer, then publishers wanted to know you. Oh, you're a Fleet Street writer, right? What's your idea for a book? Whether I would have got in so easy being in Newcastle and having been nowhere for the first book might have been very difficult. But I wrote, and I was happy doing what I did. My first daughter was born down in London while I was in Fleet Street. And then I came home and my next 2 daughters were born back in the northeast. But as I say, it was that stupid thing, you know, when you're a young man. All good journalists go to Fleet Street. All good doctors go to Harley Street. And for me, I always wanted to go to Fleet Street. I went to Fleet Street, and for me, that was going to be the rest of my career till I got the chance to cover my beloved football club and got the extra thing thrown in that I could go to World Cups and Olympic Games. That's some.
It's amazing. You know, you're saying that it's just like I went to Fleet Street, I went there, but that's an amazing leap to go from, you know, kid from Benwell, you know, living with his grandparents, to then to go to Hexham, to the Courant, and be working there, then to the Chronicle, then to Fleet Street, and also you're talking your 20s, I would imagine.
Yeah,
you've
early
got
20s.
you're an author with 2 books, living in London. You know, did you ever think that was it? This is it for me?
I mean, at that time, believe it or not, I couldn't drive and I didn't have a car. I mean, when I worked at Hexham, I used to walk down from Benwell to Scotswood Road and get on a train that took me up to Hexham, train back. When I went to London, I couldn't drive. I just got the tubes everywhere, etc. It's only when I come back home that I start to learn to drive. It was a different life. And reporting was a different life, Glenn. It shows how old I am. Because when I reported first on Newcastle, we had a football edition on a Saturday then, the Football Pink. Yeah. And it was so old-fashioned that when we went to Leeds United, who were the top team in England at the time, the champions, they didn't have any phones in the press box. I used to have to write out my match reports as the game was going on in longhand. A school kid used to come up and get it, go downstairs, had an open line and phone it over to the Chronicle. And when I first went away with the World Cup and the Olympic Games, there was no laptops and where you could just press a button and the stuff went to Newcastle. I used to have to work out what time it was wherever I was, and if I was in the Southern Hemisphere, what time it was when it was 9 o'clock in the morning in Newcastle, because I then had to phone the Chronicle at 9 o'clock and dictate my copy across. So often I was sitting at 3 o'clock in the morning when I was away, hoping on a telephone line to phone my stuff across. It was a totally different world to the world we live in now.
What was your inspiration? You know, people have, you know, obviously your dad wasn't there and your granddad had a part in your life, but who's inspiring you? You know, was there certain writers? Obviously on Fleet Street, I'm sure there was some you know, big names, some great guys that you looked up to there.
There was people like Geoffrey Green, who was working for the Times, who magnificent writer. I mean, dear me, poetry. I mean, you know, it was like getting honey poured over your head. It was just felt beautiful. And I worked alongside Colin Hart, who was a very good friend of yours from the box, and I knew him well. He was covering football as well as boxing in those days. And people like that were total inspirations for me in the way I hope that I have become now to younger journalists who want to pick your brains. Because the thing when I look back, Glenn, I was always asking questions. I think other journalists got sick of me when I was a very young journalist because I wanted to know. And from the good reporters, I asked them questions all the time. I wasn't aware of it. I wanted to pick their brains. I knew they were good. I wanted to know how they were good, why they were good, and I picked their brains all the time. Endless questions. And hopefully some of it stuck in there and worked for me, because I've managed to make a living ever since.
Watching you and talking to you now, I can see that passion, I can see that love, I can see it's so evident that theatre that you got from the radio that made you, you know, and I understand it completely, that romanticism that you saw in sport.
Oh, I've always been a romantic. When I was a little lad as well, I used to write away for autographs. I've still got them to these days, which of course you know now. I mean, Archie Moore and Emil Zatopek, the runner, and all the great footballers. I've got
Marilyn Monroe.
And then going, yeah, now that, you're cooking now. And I got the showbiz stars because my auntie used to work as as a servant, really, a maid for this Mrs. Wadge, who was a wonderful inspiration to me, who had a house on the Channel Islands. And she was a great friend of the American stars. She was a literary agent. And I used to get autographs, and I've got them to this day, of people like Marilyn Monroe, Humphrey Bogart, Tyrone Power, Peter Sellers, Diana Dawes, Joan Crawford, Jack Lemmon. You name any of the big Hollywood stars in the golden era, and I've got the autograph. And it was the fantasy thing that I had with the radio. When I got these, the mind was just buzzed, and I therefore wanted to write about these people. And the amazing things is in that autograph book, when I was a little Ben, was autographs of people like Len Shackleton, who then became my roommate in 1969 when we won the Fairs Cup. He'd been a player for Newcastle and Sunderland. He became my roommate as a journalist. The two heroes I had as a kid were Joe Harvey and Jackie Milburn. They became personal friends. Joe Harvey was my manager in '69 when we won the trophy, and Jackie Milburn. They say never meet your hero, yes, your schoolboy hero, because he'll be a disappointment. You see him through stardust. That's how you look at him. And then you meet him and he's a human being with warts and everything everybody else has got. Jackie Milburn wasn't. Jackie Milburn was as good as I remembered when I fantasised over Newcastle United centre forwards. He was an amazing, amazing man, and I got very close to him.
You've almost, as a kid, it seems like you've fantasised your lifestyle, and then you've made it happen.
Yeah, when I think about it, that's true. And I don't
You've
know
done
whether-
everything you wanted, everything you've set out to do in life, in sport, in journalism. You've thought about it sometime in your life, and you've achieved it. How have you done that?
Well, thankfully that I did, because the rest of it has been a pretty bumpy ride. But the professional part of it's been terrific. I mean, Jackie Milburn was the epitome for me. I mean, for goodness sake, a little lad, and there's this centre forward who ran like the wind and scored goals like you could only dream of. And you watch, and he's a Geordie, and he's playing in black and white for your club, and you adore him. Then you come to meet him, and he's as lovely as you thought he would be. I wrote 3 or 4 books with him when he was here, and one of the big breaks I got through knowing Jackie so well was that we wrote a book together, and when it come out, I got a phone call in the office, and it was from this guy Brian Klein, a London call. Hello, yeah, you've just done a book with Jackie Milburn. Yeah, sure, yeah. Well, what's this all about? And he was a researcher for This Is Your Life, and he was saying Jackie Milburn's a wonderful story from when he was a player, but he's yesterday's man. This book's put him back in the public eye, who would like to do This Is Your Life. Do you think he would do it? And I'm saying, I'm not so certain. He's a shy guy, etc., etc. But they asked if I'd be the go-between. So I was the go-between between him and Lorna, his wife, and she said he won't go to London. He doesn't like London. It's that big city and it's smoky and he doesn't want to go. So for the first time ever at that time, This Is Your Life came up into the provinces to do This Is Your Life, and it was Jackie Milburn. And I was the go-between the whole way, and on the day of the filming, I had to keep Jackie occupied, because if we found out about it, it's off, because the surprise element is no longer there. So I arranged all sorts of interviews with people up at St James's Park with Arthur Cox. I had to beg and steal and borrow to ask if I could go to his house to have lunch, or my missus is out, and all right, come up there. And he did burnt bacon and eggs. And we eventually got down. He thought we were going to the television studios to do a interview on the book. And I had to go and make up and get made up beside him as if I was going to be part of it. And then when we walked out, Eamon Andrews come from the right with a big red book and give him the book. And the Charltons were there because it was the family. Bert Trautmann, the goalkeeper from '55, who was a German prisoner of war goalkeeper, flown in from Pakistan for the whole thing. And afterwards, I wrote an article about with Jackie's permission, about the background, how this program come about. And there's only me could write it, because I had been part of that all the way through. And the amazing thing is, and thank you, Jackie, so much, it was the first time ever in this country there was an award for the Provincial Sports Writer of the Year, the provincial papers, for the whole of Great Britain. The first time there was ever an award, and the piece I put in as my entry was the Jackie Milburn story, the background to This Is Your Life. And I won the award, which is the first ever award in this country, 1980-something, 79. First ever award for it, and it was because of Jackie. So God bless Jackie for that. And I've won a few since, but that's why I won.
You know, you say a few since, but how amazing is it that, you know, you've been respected by the Northeast for so long, that in your early 20s they brought you back from Fleet Street. They saw the worth and the value and how good you were, that they brought you back, and they offer you in your contract, you know, every World Cup, every Olympic Games. That really shows you, you know, I mean, at such a young age, it must have made you feel pretty good that you were wanted. You know, you see these footballers now, when the local teams want them and they want to bring them back, and it's big money. I mean, it must have been pretty magnificent for you to think, you know, I'm a big, you know, I'm the top man.
Well, you get more appreciated. I never thought I was the top man, incidentally, but I was really a tunnel vision. I really was right down the line. But I mean, thank you, Chronicle, because not only did they do that for me, but once I retired officially at 65 and you had to go off the payroll and come back on as a freelance, but there wasn't a break in continuity at all. But they never ever sent anybody to the World Cup and the Olympic Games ever again, you know. So when I stopped doing that, it hasn't happened anymore with staff people. And yes, it was getting to the age where it was financially difficult, but they've also kept me on. I'm into my 80s now and I'm still reporting. Now, the Chronicle could have finished me at 65 and said, sorry, time to retire. I didn't want to retire. What do I want to retire for? If I retired, I'd spend all my time watching Newcastle United. But I'd have to pay about £1,000 for a season ticket. I'd be stuck up in the gods instead of having the best seat in the stadium, in the press box, and somebody pays me to sit in it.
Sean, I think there'd be a strike in Newcastle if you ever even thought of calling it a day, or if the Chronicle absolutely in their wildest dreams thought they were going to stop doing that.
I would ask you to organise it for me because I would want there to be a strike. No, it's the love of my life and I've been a very, very, very lucky man, and I thank the Chronicle for keeping faith with me, because they could have easily, I mean, I am a bit of a thing for them to trumpet about now because I've done about 57 years and I'm still comatose. Like, so.
But it was also a match made in heaven, because they brought you back to Newcastle United, a team that you loved, but also you were the perfect personality to instantly gel with the players and the stars, and I think you did straight away with one of the legends of Newcastle, Malcolm MacDonald.
Oh, absolutely. And the interesting thing, you know how I said it was different technically in those days, you know, phoning your stuff across. It was different in the approach with players, etc. then, because nowadays you sit in a press conference once a week with the manager, everybody's sitting there, and you needn't ask a question. But you can write down all the answers and you can produce a bit of story, and you haven't asked a single question to get that story. There wasn't press conferences in those days unless something massive happened. I walked up every day to St James's Park and saw Joe Harvey, the manager, one-to-one. And so it depended on me asking the right questions. It depended on him liking me. If he disliked me, he would tell me nothing, etc., etc. But you had to strike a balance, Glenn. And I think when I look back, the easy balance would have tried to be Mr. Nice Guy. You know, all the time I'll be Cliff Richard and I won't be Meatloaf. Well, I've always had a bit of Meatloaf in me, you know. And I think you got respect, because if I felt something was wrong, I'd say it. And that produced respect rather than just licky, and, you know, I'll write anything you want me to write. But you could also have personal relationships with players. I mean, Irvin Natras and Bob Moncur, who were in the great Newcastle sides of the early 70s, they became godparents to a couple of my girls. I mean, Malcolm MacDonald, I was his best man when he married Carol. They became personal friends, and Super Mac was totally that, and is that to these days, as you are, as you know. My two great mates in sport are you two, the Macs.
Was it also then a lot more about trust, especially with the papers, because you got their trust, and that's why, you know, you're beloved with footballers and sportsmen, is because, you know, you're not looking to tuck them up.
I think the biggest example of that, Glenn, and it is right, I remember the 74 Cup final, Newcastle playing in the FA Cup final, 74, having won the Cup all those times in the 50s, will they do it again, etc. And I went down for a week before the final, and I was down with the team. And I heard on the Thursday, Joe Harvey pulled Stuart Barraclough, who was Newcastle's outside right, pulled him to one side and said, I'm not starting you in the cup final. Tactically, I'm doing this, that and the other. You'll not be playing. There was only one sub in those days, so he wasn't even going to be a sub. One of the players come to me in the afternoon and said, hey, Barra's upstairs, he's packing his gear. He's just been told he's not going to play on Saturday. And he's in tears and he's going to go home. And he was a good pal of mine. good pal of mine. So I rushed up to his room and said to him, and there he was when he opened the door. He had his suitcase on the bed, throwing all his things. I said, whatever you do, Stewie, don't walk out on Newcastle. It'll kill you with the fans. You walked out on our club on the eve of the cup final, whether you're justified or not, don't do it. It'll kill you with any future at Newcastle, and it'll kill you with a transfer, because clubs will look and say, he must be a bit of a troublemaker, him. Don't do it. And I talked him out of doing it. So I talked myself out of having the biggest story I could have had, which is a Newcastle star walks out on team 48 hours before cup final. Talked myself out of that story. I did it for two reasons. One, I loved the guy, and I thought, he's a young lad, for goodness sake. He's not a man of great wealth or experience, or he doesn't realise what he may be doing. And so I was protecting him. And I also knew, I never told the Chronicle at the time I did that, they knew since, but I also knew, you know what, I'm going to miss perhaps the biggest story at that time, but I'm going to get 6 stories in the future nobody else gets, because he trusts me and the rest of the players trust me, because on the crunch story, I didn't help tuck him up. I helped him do the right thing. And you know what was wonderful? 2 years later, we played at Wembley again in a cup final, League Cup final, and he played for Newcastle. So he played in a cup final for Newcastle at Wembley. If he'd walked out on Newcastle in 74, he wouldn't have been there in 76 to play.
And a mark of friendship you see, you've had in your career with the likes of Malcolm Supermac, who got you through, a particularly very tough time in your life, and was a lifesaver for you.
Yeah, very much so. I used to do a weekly column, which went on right until recently. And when he was the centre forward for Newcastle, the superstar centre forward, and it was out of season, and I arranged, I arranged to see him in a hotel in Newcastle to do it. I just had the only son I ever had, Nicky. I just had Nicky, and we suddenly had discovered that he had a valve into his heart, which was the wrong way round, and he was going to need an operation, and a major operation. And what they were going to do was blow a hole through his groin at the heart to make it last until he was old enough, perhaps 8-year-old, to be able to stand the operation. They'd had one go at it, and it had failed. And he died at 11 weeks old, and that had just happened. The only son, and everybody says you must have a son when you're in sport. I had 3 daughters, and by the way, I had wonderful, wonderful girls. And that had just happened to me, and Malcolm knew, and he arrived before me, and what we did the column, then we were going to go and have lunch, and then that was going to be it. Do the column first before you have a drink so that you've got it all down. I hadn't to write it up till Monday. This was a Saturday. And he said to the waiter, whenever you see that bottle emptied of white wine, just put another one in. Don't ask if we want one, or just keep it going. Because he just wanted me to talk and relax. I met him at 12 o'clock. They threw us out at 10 in the evening. So we'd had 10 hours non-stop in the restaurant. We then moved out of the restaurant into the bar while they hoovered all the restaurant, and then we went back in when the dinner guests come. And it got me through a period that I needed to get through. And, he's a superstar, and he's bothered and concerned about me. That was the friendship we had, because I was best man when he got married. And that was wonderful. And it's those friendships. When I look back and think I've been lucky to be able to string 2 sentences together. I've been lucky with the Chronicle, etc. But I've also been lucky with the friendships this has brought. People like yourself, people like MacDonald, people like Jackie Milburn. To have those sort of friends that came through my profession, but it become personal, is an absolute blessing, an absolute joy.
It must have been so, I can't even begin to imagine how that must have felt like, trying to do your job, trying to be in this lifestyle, but then you're carrying the coffin, which you did, of your young child. That must have been, did you slip? Did you keep yourself together? Did you go off the rails?
All of those things probably. I just remember sitting in the hearse, and because he was 11 weeks old, he was just in a coffin on my knee, and all the flowers around, and going and thinking, all of a sudden, my huge passion to be a writer and to do the best and be the best and win awards, all of a sudden didn't matter. It didn't matter anymore. And yes, I found it difficult. And I'd always wanted girls, Glenn. For some reason, fathers, little girls, you can stick them on your knee, you become the hero, etc., etc. So I always wanted a little girl. Once I'd had a little boy, I realised what that meant to me. And it never happened again. We didn't have a little boy, but tough times. But life's tough. Life can't always be what you want it to be. No. And I had the plus sides, but I had my mum and dad's situation during the war. I had a Nicky situation later. So things happen. And I guess they've got to happen. There's got to be light and shade. You can't walk on the sunny side of the street for the whole of your life. At some stage, you've got to be in darkness. At some stage, you've got to be in darkness. You know why? Because you appreciate the light when you come out of that darkness.
And how much is the fantasy and also the reality of football and the great highs that's brought you? How much did that help you to carry on?
I got immersed in it, and it's my release valve. But I always remember, I look back now and I think, I hope my 3 girls don't actually think that I was not an absent father, but perhaps that I put football before them, because I didn't consciously do that. But sometimes it appears like that. For example, the Munich Olympics, yes, where the Black September gang broke in, etc. I was covering that, and for 48 hours, I chased the car that took the hostages and the guys that had took them hostage to the airport to fly them out. I chased that in a taxi to the airport to see them fly out. And I remember it's stupid, isn't it? I was in the taxi with a couple of other hacks. And as we were approaching the airfield, we suddenly heard gunfire. This was the snipers were trying to pop off the guys that had the hostages. And I just remember the taxi driver just shouted, just opening the door and shouting, "I'm getting out of here." And he just ran. And he just left it. We all sitting in the back of the taxi. He just hoofed it because there was gunfire, and we were stupid to try to get there. But the drama of that, and for 48 hours or 72 hours, my wife only knew I was alive because the reports were in the paper. I never phoned home. I didn't have time to phone home. I was on the job because I had been writing the back page. I was now writing the front page because of the Munich hostages and the deaths, and I was actually there. And so I was writing the front page. And I just, when you get on a wheel that just goes round, round, round. And I never thought of phoning home. And I talked to my wife.
Well, it wasn't the time of mobile phones or anything.
No, there was no mobile phones.
When you started, I don't think there was phones at all, was there?
Well, I think there was only pigeons, and I used to put the little notes on the pigeons' legs. Not true, but it was almost like that. It was totally different. And I often think that my drive has produced everything I wanted. But if there was a cost to pay, I didn't pay it. My wife or my kids would pay it. And that's a little bit of a sadness. And I talk with the girls now, and I think everything's fine. The girls are lovely and they're proud of me, etc., etc. But I think when they were little, did they ever think, because I used to go away 5 or 6 weeks with the World Cup or the Olympic Games every 2 years in the summer to cover the whole thing. And I was away every other weekend with Newcastle United if they went on tour. When they were playing in Europe, I was never at home. And I just sometimes think, I hope to understand.
The family must have got scared at times, because when you're going and you're heading off all over the world, there's dangerous situations that come about. There's, as you said, terrorism. There's also flying. There's also problems with flying. And you had one particular incident with Björn Borg, which is a little bit scary as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. Very scary. It was celebrations for Newcastle 500 years. And one of the sponsors was Saab, Swedish company. And they said, what can we do to help the celebrations, make them extra special? I know what we'll do. We'll bring up Björn Borg, who's Swedish. So,
and he's prime.
He's just won Wimbledon a month and a half before he come to Newcastle on that flight. Right. He just won Wimbledon, so he was big time. And he was, all the girls adored him. You know, he was this beautiful, handsome guy. Hated him myself, but no, I didn't. But he looked like the Viking, you know. And the idea was that I would fly down to London, then we would fly up to Newcastle on the Saturday morning, and I would be with him, and I'd do a story of the whole thing. Then we walked down Eldon Square through all the punters, etc., and did something on stage. That's fine. Flew down on the Friday, stayed overnight in the hotel. Only trouble is, during the night, storms were let loose all over London, and it was lashing down, and winds were like 100 miles an hour. They closed down Heathrow. There was no flights from Heathrow to Newcastle. So they decided we must get Björn Borg up there at any cost because it's a celebration. So they found a little private airfield just around the outskirts of London, and one of these little planes that felt like a kite, you know, the little 3-seater planes. So I had a pilot in the front and then Björn Borg and me. Took off. And honestly, we were just going up and down, up and down, up and down, and you could hear the pilots just sitting behind me. And all of a sudden, we got close to Newcastle Airport, and the pilot got a message, and he said, Newcastle Airport's closed down. There's been a fatality. Somebody's tried to come in. A passenger has taken a heart attack because they fear, etc., etc. So we're going to divert you to Teesside. And the pilot says, he says, no. He says, we're going to have to come into Newcastle. We've got a very important person on board. He said, in this big celebration, people are waiting for them, etc. And I said to him, it's all right if we go to Teesside. By the way, I don't mind if we go to Teesside. So we went into Newcastle. And Björn Borg, who's Mr. Cool, that is what he was. He was under pressure. McEnroe would go crackers. Jimmy Connors would go crackers. Björn Borg was Mr. Cool. He was ashen. He's never at any stage of his career, he was absolutely ashen. And we were literally dropping 10 foot at a time. And somehow got in with the wings going like that, etc. And again, I got a page 1 lead out of it the next day. Death flight with Borg. You know, this other guy had died on the way in another plane, and I was able to... I mean, I don't know if I'm a jinx or I just go there. I was there with Munich. I was there with Borg where he never went. And then I went to Daytona Beach with Newcastle for the 24-hour race, which was a car race over 24 hours. And the Newcastle car somersaulted into the air. I'm actually watching it, and it somersaulted in the air and burst into flames. Luckily, the driver and everything was okay. But when you think, I'm not certain if chaos follows me or I follow chaos. But, I mean, you and I've got a few...
You've got me thinking now, haven't you? You've got me thinking.
We've had that once or twice.
We have had that once or twice.
Teófilo Stevenson.
Teófilo Stevenson, the legend of Cuban boxing, the legend of any Olympic boxing, 3-time heavyweight champion of the heavyweight gold medalist, who you were very eager to meet on one of the trips to Cuba. And we met him on the morning he phoned me up, as he did all the time, but this time strangely he phoned me up very early in the morning, and we went off as you were rushing to get the best story you could get. We rushed down to his little modest little bungalow, his larder parked there, and we knocked on the door, and he came to the door with bleary eyes, with a pink towel
he did.
round his waist. Now that was pretty scary, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, it was. And he was a gigantic guy.
He was
of
a
course.
monster, and it then what ensued got even worse, because he invited us in, and it was very obvious that he was drunk very bad, really, really drunk.
And this was about 9 in the morning,
This was
Glenn.
9 in the morning, been on the rum all night. And then it became obvious that something had happened in the family, which we later found out his wife had left him, took his child, and he was in a very, very bad way. I managed to talk him in. You were waiting for this. Now you talk about all these awards you've got for sport. I remember this one because you got an award at the end of this, and it was. I then tried to get Teófilo. I got him up and got him changed, and he came down with a big bulge in his pants, but it was at the side of his pants.
Yes.
It was on his hip, and I'm thinking that looks odd. He then said for us to move out into the garden, and he sat on a what was like a little shed, which was just full to the brim of rum
Empty
bottles.
bottles, yeah.
His pool was completely empty with weeds in the bottom, which had never obviously had water in or been used. And he sat with bleary-eyed, telling us a tale of woe, how the family left, and then decided to put his Magnum, which he'd gotten a nice present off Castro, that he
was a
decided
personal present,
to
wasn't it?
stick it in your face.
He did. The gun.
Yeah, I'm glad you sorted that one out. Stuck that in your face, and again, you never spoke at all that day.
You tend to be quiet when some drunks wafting a gun around you.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
and I must admit, John, I was absolutely I was so, I just thought, I brought my best pal out to Cuba to meet a legend of mine, and he's going to get shot off him. I moved the gun away, and he laughed, and then put it back in your face, and then put it in my face, and it was just, and I was so trying to calm him down, using everything I could possibly think of, because I really, really thought we were going to die that day, and I think it was very, very likely that we could have died that day. It was a nightmare. Eventually managed to talk him into getting changed and we'll go and get something to eat, and he started to come round a little bit, but was still very depressed. Put the gun in his pants. We got a taxi, and we managed. It all took what seemed a lifetime, didn't it? It seemed a lifetime, with our lives hanging in the balance at every moment. And then we got in, and we managed to talk him up to meeting some friends who were up. It was at a bowling alley, up some steps. We got to the bottom of the steps. You looked at me, and I looked at you, and just said, "Run."
I tell you what, you saying Bolt wouldn't have caught us that day.
We ran, and God bless him. Unfortunately, alcohol took him a very short time later. He died with the results of coming off alcohol. But I'll never forget that when you phoned me up and said that you'd won the article of the year for the best broadcasting, when you had never said one solitary word, John.
You see, Glenn, I must tell you, the art of being a wordsmith is that if you can turn silence into a 2,000-word piece, you deserve an award. And the funny thing is, just that story you were telling, just so everybody would realise how true it was, the gun, we did have proof that it was actually loaded, because after that, while he was wafting it at the two of us, he saw a bird fly past and he tried to shoot the bird. And so we knew the gun was loaded. And I mean, you know, I thought I'm just going twice, both with Teófilo Stevenson and with Björn Borg, who I thought we could have died in that plane. Yeah. You become a quiz question, don't you? Who was when Buddy Holly died, it was who was with Buddy Holly when he died, and it's a big bopper in Ricky Valens. It'll be, you know, who was with Björn Borg when they died. Nobody would guess me. Who was with Teófilo, and they would guess you, but they would never guess me. So I thought I could become a little asterisk in history.
Well, you certainly like drama, and you've certainly enjoyed having plenty of drama because you knew a young man from the northeast called Gaza.
Oh yes, who produced an old man in the northeast called me. Oh yeah, I mean one of the world's saddest figures, but one of the world's most beautiful people. He was both of those things. The most talented English footballer I've ever seen. There's George Best, who was Irish, and then there's Pele, who I thought was the best in the world, as well as right up to Messi and Ronaldo. But he was unique, and a little lad from Gateshead. He always had a self-destruct button, which he pressed quite regularly, but a heart of gold. And the one redeeming feature is that he's got a heart of gold. And I remember he invited me when he left Newcastle and left Spurs, and he went over to sign for Lazio in Rome, and he was kept coming across with England, and he invited me to go over to Rome and stay with him in his house, do the article, you know, the Geordie abroad, little Gaza. And I went and stayed with him. And I remember when he went to training in the morning, he was obsessed with Harley Davidson motorbikes in those days. And he obviously had one. But
True.
Oh, he had 5 at the house. But Lazio had realised by now that he was a slate short of a full roof. So they'd said to him, listen, you don't drive. He just had the bad injury at Spurs. Yeah. You don't drive your Harley Davidson, mind, here. But no, wouldn't dream of it. So he got on his Harley Davidson in the morning, and the 4x4 behind, his dad drove with me to follow him, and he had a German World War II hat on.
As you do.
Tin hat, as you do, of course, most natural dress. I just lost mine today and I would put this on. So we're following him through the traffic from the outskirts of Rome right into Lazio training ground. And just as you turn right to go into the training ground, there's a garage. He drove into the garage, parked his bike, took his hat off, put it on the handlebars, jumped in the 4x4, and around we went to training. He arrives, fine. After training, comes back out, does the same thing, gets on the bike, through all the traffic, giving the old signs on the top because we couldn't get through the traffic like him on a bike. He drives down the country road up to his mansion, and it was a mansion, shown off with electronic gates, which he presses a button on the bike and the gates open. He drives straight up the drive, long drive. The patio doors at his house are open, and he drives straight up the drive and through the patio doors on his Harley Davidson, parks it on a white sheepskin rug in front of the fire, takes his hat off, puts it on the side, and puts Elvis Presley on the telly, a video. And that, he was absolute lunatic, complete and utter lunatic. But he persuaded, I went over for 3 days and stayed for 6. He persuaded me not to go home. He said, I'll pay for you to stay and rejig your house, rejig your flights back home, etc., etc. And I had to phone the Chronicle and say, look, staying out for X number of days. Wacky guy. And life caught up with him. I'm working with him again at the end of the year. He's doing a big show up here with Waddle and Beardsley and him. It'll sell out the Time Theatre, but he's tough work to work with now because you never, as George Best was at times, you never know which Gaza's going to turn up on the evening. But
are you, because you mentioned a few names and self-destruct buttons and all that. What is the attraction? Are you the attraction to them, or are they the attraction to you?
I've often been asked that, especially by my family. They say, are you attracted to wild people, or wild people attracted to you because you're wild as well? And I think there's a dollop of that wildness in me, in as much as I hate being bored. You know, I mean, Cliff Richard could have been the greatest rock and roller in the history of rock and roll, and I wouldn't have liked him because he's squeaky clean and he's predictable, and it's Jonesville for me. I want Rod Stewart, or I want Meatloaf, or I want somebody with a bit of edge to him. And all the people that I've made close friendships with, outside of Jackie Milburn, all the people, whether it was you, whether it was MacDonald, whether it was George Best, they've always had that streak in them. They've always... And I find that fascinating. I also find it fascinating to write about. You know, who wants to read dull and who wants to read excitement?
Well, you must be getting some something to write about with George Best.
Oh!
My hero.
Great man. One of the best players you wish to meet, but like Gascoigne, just spoiled his own career, destroyed his own career. And I remember Manchester United were playing at Newcastle and George Best was the superstar. And again, another good story you get. There was a phone call to the police. They were staying overnight in, I think it was the Five Bridges at Gateshead in the hotel in Man U. The police got a call, saying it was the height of the Troubles, and the police got a call saying it was from the IRA and we're going to shoot George Best this afternoon at the Newcastle match. Panic, blind panic, as you can expect. So the police went to the hotel. George had to lie face down in the aisle of the bus so that he wasn't sitting at a window as anyone's target, and the police were on the coach with him. I found this out late at the match and later. Went to St James's Park. The police put snipers on the large houses overlooking St James's Park in those days, put snipers up on the roofs, etc., two behind the dugout, the Manchester United dugout. I talked to George afterwards. I said, you were active this afternoon. He said, I wasn't going to stand still. Because, you know, a moving target's more difficult than a one stand still. He was here, there and everywhere. And he scored the only goal of the game. We lost 1-0 and George Best scored the goal. And it only come out afterwards about the IRA threat on his life. And George told me the story, and I spoke to Joe about it afterwards, and Joe said, of course, politically incorrect, but in those days you could be politically incorrect. And Joe said, you know that George was playing, and Joe said, I wish I'd shot the little bugger, we might have got a point. He said, she said, and it was politically incorrect, but so inoffensive of that period, not of now. But that was the sort of pressure that George Best played under. But when he didn't, he made his own pressure. He made his own pressure by the way he lived his life. I mean, I remember him turning up. I did a dinner at Cheshire Street, and he turned up with Miss World on his arm, literally Miss World, not a good-looking girl, literally Miss World on his arm. He was absolutely sauced, and we weren't talking till after the dinner, not before. I was sitting next to him. Unbelievably, the people who put the dinner on, who paid a fortune to get him, were ladling more drink into him because they just wanted to be nice. Here's another one, George. Here's another one. I'm thinking, we're doomed here. We're doomed. Like, and my questions got longer and longer, and his answers got shorter and shorter because if you remember the famous interview he did on telly with, I think it was with Wogan, where he lasted 2 questions because he was that sauced, and they closed the curtains on him. The same happened in this case. Get him when he was sober, and he was the funniest, wittiest man to interview it was possible. But you were riding a bucking bronco. You didn't know which besties turned up. You now don't know which gazzards turns up.
Well, we did a few TV programmes. Again, it's along that line. We did Hughie Gallagher, who's
yes, we did
a little bit of a wild man, amazing footballer. Jerry Lee Lewis, who was a lot of a wild man. We did his concert, and then Mike Tyson and Sonny Liston.
In Vegas.
They weren't exactly the head of the Charm Squad, were they?
No, they weren't. But they were fabulous times, Glenn. to
But
do.
is this? I'm getting the you love those characters because that's you as a little kid writing all these fantasies again, isn't it?
It is. And while you can write a piece like Teófilo Stevenson, where there's virtually little said, but you've just got to describe what happened, you don't want a dull interview. If you're going to write at your best, you want to interview colour. You want to be, and I know if I'm interviewing Jerry Lee Lewis or we're doing something between you and I on Liston and Tyson, I know it's colour, and that gives me the opportunity to write. I can't write if I'm looking at a bowl of cherries and that's it. And I've got to write about that. Then I'm taxed. But give me something to get my claws into. That's what every writer worth his salt wants. But I was also, and I still am, attracted more to the Wilder personality than the straight bat and pad personality, which I find slightly boring.
How do you deal with someone like who's I suppose a little bit wild? How do you deal with a Brian Clough, who's a great what and a lovely guy if you're on the right side of him?
Oh, yes. I mean, now there's a different character, and what a difficult guy that could be. And he always wanted to do the unpredictable thing, Cloughie. I remember, amazingly, in those days, Newcastle and I went to Jersey pre-season for pre-season training. Just Jersey. They go abroad now, they go to Asia or America. We went to Jersey. And Cloughie was on holiday with his good lady in Jersey. Pre-season training. Forrest were training, but Cloughie does what he wants. He's in the same hotel as us on holiday. And he sees me going for dinner, and I was doing talk-ins with him at the time, so I know him well. And Newcastle got the table down at the bottom, and he sees me just sit on a table, and he says, "John, bring all your stuff across onto his table." He says, "Why aren't you sitting with the team?" I said, "Oh, no, they won't want that. They don't want that. You can't do that." He says, "Right, every night you sit with me on this table, on his table, for dinner." And then when we went in the bar afterwards, I remember Lord Westwood, who was a Newcastle chairman at the time, sees Cloughie, thinks this is wonderful, comes across, "So, Mr. Clough," Lord Westwood with the patch on, and "How do you do?" And Cloughie turns to him and says, "Excuse me," he said, "I'm talking to my friend," he says. "I'll talk to you later," and turns his back on him. And it was his way of giving me a G up. I didn't need it. There wasn't a problem, but he felt Newcastle had snubbed me, giving me a lift up and putting them in that place. And he was so unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen. I mean, I did talk-ins with him where there was one at Gateshead where all the hierarchy were upstairs, the mayor in the chain and all that, to speak to all at half time. And I had little girls going to go on stage at half time and do some some gymnastic thing. And he decided he wasn't going to leave the stage. So the girls didn't get on. The little girls, 6 and 7, were in tears because they couldn't get on stage to do their little bit. The mayor upstairs in the chains were desperate to talk to him, and he wouldn't go up there. He sat on the stage the whole time and signed autographs up here, etc., etc. He just did anything that was unpredictable. He would do, but captivating and original. Would he get away with it today? I'm not so certain he would. I mean, he stopped the coach on the way to a match and take him in a pub, and they would all and get everybody a pint on a Saturday morning on the way to a game, and because others didn't do that. And what he said to me when I asked him, I said, "What are you doing? What's all that about, Cloughie?" And he said, "Listen, 2 things. First of all, it relaxes them, and secondly, I'm in charge. They get a half each, but that's it. We're back on the coach. They're not in there for the rest of the night where they're going to get sauced before the game, which they might do on other occasions." And he just wanted to do the unpredictable thing the whole time. Best manager England never had, and the best manager Newcastle United didn't have, although they almost did, because I tapped him to come to Newcastle United, and he was very keen to do so. because he was from the northeast and he knew the sort of follow. Very keen to do so, and then it terrified the bigwigs in Newcastle United, who thought he's going to be in charge of a madhouse. We won't be able to handle him, and so it all went cold and it didn't happen. But it might have happened. It might have.
What do you think's prepared you? What is it in your life that's prepared you to be able to deal with a Paul Gascoigne and a Cloughie and Prince Rainer and all these different people from different walks of life? What's prepared? What do you think prepared you for that?
I think because I was so fascinated to hear their story that I couldn't get gaga about the fame. I mean, the fame meant, as a little lad, I loved watching superstars and I was starry-eyed about them. But when you stuck a chopped person in front of me, I wanted to get to their story, and I was so anxious to get the story and so passionate to hear what they said about things. I didn't get all, ooh, what's this guy doing talking to me, etc. And I still feel like that today. It's an undying curiosity, Glenn. I'm curious by nature. I want to know what makes you tick and why you do this and how you won the world title and how things happened against all the odds. I want to know.
So do you think that's why you wanted to be in this situation as a manager with Gateshead? Did you wanted to see if you could do what the Cloughys could do?
Well, what happened with Gateshead was that it suddenly dawned on me one day that I'd spent all my life telling Newcastle United how they should be run as a journalist. This is a disgrace, you're not doing this right, consider the fans more on this, etc., etc. I thought, how about putting your money where your mouth is? How about trying to run a club yourself? And I bought Gateshead. The reason I was able to do it, because financially I couldn't really do it, but I'd been part of the Magpie group that catapulted John Hall into St James's Park, and as a consequence of that, he wanted to reward me. So when I told him I was thinking of buying Gateshead, he said, I'll be a sponsor. Cameron Hall Developments, his company, will sponsor Gateshead, which meant my wages were covered for the season, and etc., etc. So I could go out and do it. And
You're still working with the Chronicle, obviously.
Oh, aye. Yeah. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, went to the Chronicle from 6 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, went straight over to Gateshead and worked from 3:30 till 9 o'clock at night at Gateshead. Went home, went to bed and did the same next day. Yeah. But I wanted to see and honestly, it was like looking at football from a different perspective, totally. And I always remember in a board meeting, having a board meeting and saying, come to a major decision on something. And the rest of the board were getting up to leave the room. And I said, hey, boys, before you go, I said without thinking, before you go, whatever you do, don't tell the press. And I went, don't tell the press. You are the press. I realised that there's some things you couldn't have out in the public domain at that stage, but I used the phrase, don't tell the press, having spent the whole of my life trying to find out things like that I wasn't supposed to know. But it was a wonderful experience to run Gateshead, because I did what I always do. I ran a football club and I did this. I'm not saying I was successful, and it certainly wasn't Newcastle United. But it was like that on a smaller scale. It was the same day-to-day thing that Newcastle do, I was doing on a smaller scale. And I wouldn't give up those years for anything. But I had to give them up eventually, because they would have killed me. I was also smoking 50 fags a day at that stage. So I had to give something up. Yeah,
you've always kind of lived life on the edge as well. You've had had the odd drink here and there, and 50
very odd one on occasions, yes.
Fags a day, and then lived the life when, what motivates you now when you've done this for so long, and yet I can still hear the fire in your belly. I can still, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I felt that same passion, that same love, that same adventure that you've got. What keeps that going? That's
a good question. I think what keeps it going right now is that I am the only working journalist in the Northeast still working who saw Newcastle win a trophy in 1969. And before that, I was only a little lad in the 50s. And therefore, I've set a record and become, you know, when people become legends or become knighted, I'm talking about proper people, big stars, you know how they get that? Just by staying alive. You stay alive, people think you're wonderful because you're still alive, that John.
Or die early.
Die 21 or stay alive till you're my age.
Yeah.
And I've decided to do the second thing. So and I want to set the record for as long as I can. As long as this doesn't go, and heaven forbid, because I've seen it go, and a lot of dear friends of mine, footballers who have got dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever, horrendous. As long as that doesn't go, doesn't matter about this going, because I'm not playing football. I need to write about it. If that stays with me, I will continue writing. And when that goes, I won't know anyway, so that'll be fine. But I will continue writing because that, apart from my family and my friends, it gives me the best reason in the world for getting up in the morning. I get up in the morning and I'm thinking, let's go another day.
Well, let's recap and just tell me some of the amazing moments. You know, there must be a lot, but what are the standout moments for you that really, really shaped the career of John Gibson?
Great question. Being part of success, I think, in terms of being with Newcastle when they won the one and only European trophy, 1969, the still only European trophy they have ever got. Being part of seeing this latest win after 70 years. Being part of England singing the World Cup, it's still the most historic moment. Being part, bless you, of you winning the world title, the only Northeast, the only Geordie man ever at any weight to win a world boxing title. To be part of that from the inside, it was a privilege. You let me into the dressing room before your fight when you won the title. I mean, how many journalists get that sort of privilege? Wonderful, wonderful moments. We in the Northeast mightn't have won some trophies, bags of them, like Manchester United or Arsenal or Liverpool. But I tell you what, when we have, there's been some wonderful memories in there, and I've been lucky enough to get on the inside of them, like your world title fights, like England with the World Cup, like Newcastle winning in 69 and just the last year, travelling with the World Cup and being with the Olympics and seeing Jonathan Edwards win a gold medal, Olympic gold medal in Australia right at the end when it looked as if it was too late for him to win a world medal, and interviewing him when he come off in Sydney, being the other side of the world and seeing a guy who was brought up in Geordie land winning an Olympic gold medal. Fabulous. Being in Munich when they had the Black September gang, but also seeing Brendan Foster running the 1500 metres in that stadium around all this chaos and being part of that. Special moments. And you know what? There's going to be some more to come. And I'm going to make certain, as I've told you right at the start of this podcast, I've cancelled dying. I'm going to be around when all these other things happen. And you know why? Because people will be saying, that John Gibson, was he 99 or was he 101 when Newcastle won the Champions League?
As long as I'm with you, John, as long as I'm with you.
You'll drive me to the grave.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute
my pleasure,
pleasure
my friend.
talking to you. God bless you.